So in the first full year, what happened? So we launched it in 2014, unofficially in May, officially on November the 17th, which is World Prematurity Day. What happened? Well, in the first full year of 2015, this is what happened. So if you're used to looking at run charts, this is the dotted line represents the median of the preceding years. On the vertical axis is the preterm birth rate, and I'm only talking about singles today. And if these are epochs, these dots represent epochs, and traditionally, if you have more than 6 epochs below the median, that denotes statistical significance, although there are more sophisticated ways of doing it. So when we launched the program, we immediately reduced the rate of preterm birth across our state. These are statewide data encompassing our 35,000 births each year. And we reduced the rate by 7.6%, around 8%. And you can see the effect was immediate. So if you now look at the gestational ages, you can see here's 32 to 36 weeks, 28 to 31. So at the later ages, where the majority are, the effect occurred immediately. And this can only be altered doctors' practice and women's practice. We saturated the population of women as well with these messages. So the doctor-woman patient relationship somehow resulted in a very rapid effect. But at the 28 to 31 week gestational age, there was a later response, but it came down significantly as well. This is not iatrogenic intervention. This we believe to be screening the cervix on every pregnancy and the giving of natural vaginal progesterone. At the earlier gestational ages, it's complicated a little bit by termination of pregnancy, smaller numbers, but there was still an effect. Within the tertiary centre, and remember we've got all our eggs in one basket, we have one big tertiary centre. It's the biggest, has the biggest neonatal intensive care unit in the Southern Hemisphere. We had an immediate effect, and it went down 20%. So the reduction in our major centre went down from its usual rate of about 21%, because we have everything referred into us. It went down to 17%. So we had a 20% reduction in preterm birth. Calculation of the number of cases averted in that year came to about 200. And so if you look on the left at the early gestational ages, the business case to start the clinic required that we needed to prevent 2 very early preterm births in the year to pay for the entire program, and we prevented 47. So there's no doubt it's highly cost effective. We're now doing a formal cost effective analysis of this program. So what happened in 2016 and 2017? We've only just got the data. We have wonderful data linkage across our state, but getting access to it is a process to be navigated, is very slow. We've just got it. I'm showing you very preliminary data, subject to change and certainly not yet published. So if you're looking King Edward Memorial Hospital, which is at the tertiary centre on the right, these are non-spontaneous. So this is doctor-involved deliveries. You can see that the rate has stayed down. The rate has stayed down nearly about 20% in the tertiary level centre. The spontaneous preterm birth rate is not quite as impressive as the non-spontaneous. So within the tertiary level centre, the effect has been sustained. But outside the tertiary level centre, the story is not quite so rosy. On the right-hand side, non-spontaneous, that's doctor-involved rates, appear to have stayed down. But we've got a never-ending increase in our risk of preterm birth as our population is changing. We've got a lot of immigration. We've come off a mining boom, so there's a lot less money around. People are not having their uncomplicated third baby before. We've got a background increasing risk, but we've got a lot more work to do before that's official. This just shows that what happened in term. In the term gestational ages, we had a big increase in the 39 weeks, bottom left, and the 38 weeks, top right. But part of that is due to the fact that post-dates is disappearing in our community. So the prolonged pregnancies of yesterday's are all just about going, and meconium passage is disappearing. And the paediatric registrars in our hospitals are now getting very little experience dealing with meconium passage. So the conclusions from the West Australian branch of this was that you can lower the preterm birth rate with no knowledge by about 8%, by about 20% in the major centre, but you need to keep the intervention going to maintain the effect. So what we did then was we wanted to look at Australia as a whole, because we just represent 1/10 of Australia, and we needed to roll this out across the rest of Australia. This is Australia's preterm birth rates from 1994 to 2015. And you can see there's just this relentless increase in preterm birth, consistent with so many countries such as ours. So we put together an application to our national funding body called a partnership grant, where you're only allowed 10 investigators. So we linked 3 states, our state of Western Australia, and then the 2 most populous states, New South Wales and Victoria, and 10 of us put in to apply for a 3-state proposal, which was funded in April of this year. But we immediately decided to make this national. So this is Australia, and this is our national program. So on June the 7th of this year, at a meeting in Melbourne, we launched the Australian Preterm Birth Prevention Alliance. And this is a grouping of equals with an executive. Down the left are all the flags of each state and territory. And for those of you who don't know Australia at all, this is the Northern Territory here, this is Queensland, New South Wales, the Australian Capital Territory, like your DC where we are now, Victoria, Tasmania, which I'll refer to in a minute, South Australia, and then the great state of Western Australia. And the model is that for each state and territory we would have two lead people, which is basically an older person and then a young investigator. So the older person so that you could have influence in the state, and a young person who would then build their career and ensure succession, as well as great representation around the table. And then we have all the various disciplines represented, so we have access into the various colleges and professional bodies. So we have a midwife, a senior midwife, biostatisticians, health policy representatives, consumer representative, etc. And putting all that together comes to 29 people. So this is the country as a whole, and if you look at the top left, you can see this is Australia's preterm birth rate from 2001 to 2016, and you can see it rising. And the effect in each state and territory is very much a function of the demographics of the population in that area. So Western Australia on the left, I've shown you a bit about it. It was going up, it came down, there's a risk of it going up again. Northern Territory is higher, but you can see all of these states and territories are all experiencing an increase in their preterm birth rate. But if you want to see what the power of having data is, look at this graph. Now, most of us as clinicians can quietly spend 30 years in our hospital treating diseases, but not really knowing what the effect is. We don't really see our state data or compare our hospital data with state data with national data and other countries. We can happily treat every patient who appears in front of us without getting a feeling of where we are in comparison with everybody else. So none of us knew what this would look like until the Alliance decided to graph it out, which was the first thing we did. So this graph represents each state and territory, all 6 states and 2 territories in Australia, plotted from 1994 up until 2016, and its preterm birth rate. So this is at the top, this is the Northern Territory. This has got a very high Aboriginal population. Their preterm birth rate sits at about 15%. And so it is pretty much a straight line. They've had no impact upon it. They've been trundling along as such. All the other states and territories, you'll notice a gradual increase consistent with the national data. But if you look at this one, if you look at the green one, this is Tasmania. Tasmania is a green, forested, idyllic heaven of an island off the southeast coast of Australia with a birth number of 5,800 deliveries a year in 3 centres only. So 3 centres delivering for the state, which is an island. And it's very green, its politics is very green, and their preterm birth rate in 1994 was 5.5%, the lowest in the country, which is what anybody would have expected. But then, without them noticing, you can see what happened to them as the years went by. And by 2015 and 2016, Tasmania had developed the highest preterm birth rate in Australia, exceeding the Northern Territory. So we thought at first that this was data collection, error with data collection, but the Tasmanians have confirmed that this is what's happened. And to show the power of having data like this, this was presented at the launch of the Tasmanian branch of the Whole 9 Months 4 weeks ago, and the Minister for Health, having looked at that, committed the Tasmanian government to funding their entire program. So there's a lot of value in plotting out your data and knowing exactly what is happening. These are the faces of the 29 people who represent the Australian Alliance, 2 from each state and territory, plus all our discipline leads, the 6 members of the executive sitting in the front row. I would argue Australia's finest I present to you, and I speak on their behalf as we begin the big venture to roll the whole 9 months out across Australia and to lower the rate of preterm birth in our community. In summary, the preterm birth rate can be lowered using existing knowledge by a whole of population and statewide multifaceted program by about 8% in its first year. Maintenance of that reduction will require ongoing effort, but further reductions are going to require new discovery. But our journey has begun. The Australian Preterm Birth Prevention Alliance is now alive and well. New Zealand is forming a similar one, which will be our partner organisation. I understand Ontario in Canada is looking at one as well, as is the United Kingdom. So we in Australia are very keen to partner with any other similar country that wishes to put together a national or a state-based alliance, and together we will successfully and safely lower the rate of the major disease that affects our pregnant women and our future children. Thank you very much.